Hello pals and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books I'm planning on reading this summer. That is June, July and August. I've previously done my spring reading plans, which I'll link down below. I love planning out my reading seasonally. I feel like it gives a good amount of breathing space and then I can kind of deep dive into authors or like time periods or themes, genres that I'm really interested in. This may well be a long video, so I have a cup of peppermint tea. In every season, I like to pick a longer classic to get to, and by longer, I kind of mean over like 700-800 pages. For summer, I have picked out 2 potential books, and it really depends kind of what I'm feeling like in the moment. The 2 I've picked out are Parade's End by Maddox and Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. I don't currently own either of these, but Parade's End is one of my favourite ever novels, and I owned it up until 2 months ago. I first read this when the Tom Stoppard TV adaptation came out in I think 2012 or 2013. The copy that I read it's 12 years ago now. When I bought it, I think it had been sat on the shelf for quite a while. It was falling to pieces, kind of yellowed. So before my house move, I got rid of that one, and I've put it on request at the library. What I think I'll do is read it, if I do choose that one, read it on my Kobo and then buy myself a new copy. I might get the fancy folio edition. Parade's End, published by Maddox in 1924, was originally published as a tetralogy, so from 1924 until 1928 the 4 kind of volumes of Parade's End came up. Like I said, I've read this before, and occasionally when somebody asks me what my favourite ever novel is, I do say Parade's End. However, a flaw in the argument is that I've only ever read it the once. I would love to revisit this. It is very long. I think maybe it's like around 800 pages. It is set in Edwardian England just before the start of the First World War and follows Christopher Tietjens. He is a man out of his time. It is one of the most profound, beautiful novels that I've ever read. If you've ever read A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway, you'll know that Maddox is kind of a joke in that when he's kind of in Paris. Means a lot to me, but like I said, I've never reread it. There is always the potential that this could kind of not live up to what I remember. So I may well choose that one. I also have Vanity Fair marked out just because it looks like such a lot of fun. The long classic that I chose for spring reading was originally The Golden Bulb. I swapped that out for Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens because I just wanted something a little bit more comforting. But Vanity Fair is like an iconic Victorian novel. It's set around the Napoleonic Wars. It just looks like such a lot of fun, and that's kind of what I'm after. I mean, I could potentially read both of these, but I don't want to put too much pressure on myself. There is an audiobook version of Parade's End read by Bill Nighy. I mean, he's just the dream narrator, so potentially I could get that. But what I do with these kind of seasonal reading plans is you'll see kind of how I'm getting along in my reading wrap-ups, right? Those are my 2 longer classics. The next set of books that I have, I guess, would fall under the theme of American fiction, mainly all 20th century. The first one is A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. I've never read this. The plot for this was spoiled in one of my favourite films, Silver Linings Playbook. I know I'm going to have my heart broken when I read this. I kind of know what's going to happen. I've left this because I thought maybe it'll kind of fade and I'll be able to come to it afresh. But no. Whenever I'm in Spain on holiday, I read an Ernest Hemingway. I read The Sun Also Rises in Seville, and a couple of years ago I read The Old Man and the Sea in Tacoma in Mallorca. I'm headed back to Tacoma, and as per tradition I will take with me A Farewell to Arms. Ernest Hemingway will pop back up in our Lit Biog section. This is from 1929 and one of his earlier ones, so that is the first of our American fiction. Also on the list is another one of my favourite all-time writers, and that is James Baldwin. I'm more familiar with his non-fiction than fiction. A couple of years ago I read If Beale Street Could Talk and I absolutely loved it. This is his first novel, I believe, written in the 1950s. I think it's set in Harlem in the 1930s, and I think that this is about like family, church, both positive and negative. Really excited to read his first work of fiction and then crack on with him from there. Had this on my TBR for maybe like 3 or 4 years now, so like I really want to get to this. Next up in the American fiction section is again a book I've had on my TBR for quite a while, and there was a period about 2 years ago when everyone was reading this book. That is Cassandra at the Wedding by Dorothy Baker. This is the Dawn Books edition. This was on an episode of Backlisted, one of my favourite podcasts, which I absolutely love and I take loads of recommendations from. This is set in California in the 1960s. It's about twin sisters, one of them driving back for her sister's wedding, determined to stop the wedding. You'll notice that California and 1960s, as we get kind of through to the essays, is also a major theme. I guess that's because it's summer, and I'm really just kind of that basic, but I'm really excited to get to this. A kind of modern American classic that I've been meaning to get to for quite a while. I think this will make it into my holiday reads while I'm away. The next book I want to get to, I've had a little bit of like a moment with John Steinbeck where wherever I turn there is John Steinbeck or somebody recommending John Steinbeck to me, and yeah, I'm really excited to get to this. I had a lovely comment recommending him to me as well. This is East of Eden. From what I understand, this is a family saga and it follows two families kind of over generations. This is set in California. I realised I have read a John Steinbeck before, but in school, so it kind of doesn't count. So I have had both East of Eden and Grapes of Wrath on hold, waiting for copies from the library for quite a while. I did give in and buy this book over the weekend. I have really high expectations for this. I really hope it kind of lives up to it. Again, I feel like this may well be a holiday read for me. The next two books I have on the list are honourable mentions, that if I get the chance, or if I kind of feel like I really want to, I will get to either Tender as the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald or Save Me the Waltz by Zelda Fitzgerald. I adore F. Scott Fitzgerald. I have read this before, I think in 2010, maybe. It didn't really stick with me, but I think that was more of a me issue at the time. I remember thinking that I'd done the book a little bit of a disservice. I may read instead, or as well, Save Me the Waltz. If the feminist in me comes over stronger, I will probably read Save Me the Waltz and go with Zelda. That whole like group, Hemingway, Gertrude Stein, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Maddox, remind me of like summer, of exactly that, of Paris, of the French Riviera, of Spain. So whenever it gets to summer, I always kind of head to those. But that is a kind of honourable mention. We will see. Right, those are the American classics that I have. Next up is a book that I don't currently own, The House of Mr. Biswas by Ernest Naipaul. I've requested that my library get a copy of this on Libby. I'll hold out and see whether they do or not. Sometimes they do take notice of what you request, and sometimes not as much. I've been meaning to get to Ernest Naipaul for a really long time. Whenever when you look at lists of like your favourite author's favourite author, he's always on there. This is the House of Mr. Biswas, seems to be the one that most people recommend, and it looks great. He's a Nobel laureate. This was published in the 1960s. It's set in Trinidad, and it follows Mr. Biswas as he marries into a really influential family. This seems to be about kind of like alienation, like isolation. Like I said, I have really high hopes for this one too. Let's hope that my library come through and get me a copy. If not, I will buy a copy. Right, now we're on to our British classics section. The first novel, again, I don't own. I'll try and pop them all here. That is The Voyage Out by Virginia Woolf. This is her debut novel, written in 1915, I think. And the really early novels of Virginia Woolf, I've always been a little bit cautious about trying. I think it's because I know that she becomes more experimental as she gets older, and so the Virginia Woolf that I love of Mrs. Dalloway or Orlando isn't necessarily the Virginia Woolf that I will find in The Voyage Out. But this year I'm really focusing on going more in depth on authors that I love and reading kind of all of their backlists if possible. I do still want to enjoy the novels though. One of the things that I do find really interesting about this is that Clarissa Dalloway does make an appearance in The Voyage Out, which I think will be fascinating. So that one I don't own. I will track down a copy of that one. The next is a contemporary of Virginia Woolf and one of my favourite authors, E.M. Forster, Where Angels Fear to Tread. Like I said, I would like to have read the entire backlist by some of my favourite authors. I have with E.M. Forster, apart from Where Angels Fear to Tread, and I've reread quite a lot of them recently. The only one that I haven't reread recently, which I'll go back to this year, is Morris. This was his first novel, and this is about a kind of fancy Edwardian lady going to Italy, and then she kind of impulsively marries a kind of much younger Italian man to the horror of her kind of social circle. That sounds amazing. Even just saying that fills me with joy. That sounds so good. I just get along so well with E.M. Forster. I adore him. I find his work just fascinating and layered and full of depth. The only E.M. Forster that I haven't absolutely positively enjoyed is The Longest Journey, which comes after this one. But I'm absolutely certain I will love this. And again, this would also make the perfect holiday read. My mum's offered to take some of my books in her suitcase. So yeah, I'm really excited for this, and this is nice and short as well. Right, goodness, I need to crack on with this. This is quite a big list. Next up, again, a contemporary of Virginia Woolf, Katherine Mansfield, Bliss. This is a collection of short stories. Now, I'm not a big short story person. I never have been, really. I always find myself frustrated and wanting more from them. So generally don't read short stories, but I do really like Katherine Mansfield, and as she's a Katherine like me, I'm inclined to pick it up. This is Bliss. This was a gift from my sister. I have recently been listening to an audiobook, Rural Hours by Harriet Baker, and that's on the rural lives of three English authors. Virginia Woolf is one of them, and in the Virginia Woolf chapters, when she's at Asham House, they talk quite a lot about her friendship and rivalry with Katherine Mansfield, and that was a really interesting part. And it flagged up that I had this collection from my sister, and now her short stories, Prelude, Bliss, and The Garden Party, I really want to read. So I think what I'll do is, over summer, just every so often pick up a short story and aim to have this finished by August. I also have a Persephone collection of hers called The Montana Stories. She is so interesting, Katherine Mansfield. She's such a fascinating woman. Next up is a little bit of light relief, and that is The Tortoise and the Hare by Elizabeth Jenkins. This is the Virago Modern Classics edition. I don't know if you can see, but these editions are so beautiful, and this cover is stunning. Introduced by Hilary Mantel, one of my favourite authors. This is about a woman who is married to a barrister and her neighbour kind of vying for his affection. This is like the stand-in Barbara Pym of summer for me. I've never read any Elizabeth Jenkins, but I just know in my heart that I'm going to love this. Right, so next up is, and this is the last of the kind of British classics, is The Heat of the Day by Elizabeth Bowen. This is written in 1948, and this is a spy story and a love story set in wartime London. One of my favourite time periods for novels, so atmospheric. I mean, this is as close as she gets to kind of like a suspense novel. I've had this on my TBR for about 8 years, just waiting for the perfect time. And again, you'll notice that a lot of these, I'm so convinced that I will love them, that I don't very often feel a like urgent need to like pick them up straight away. I don't mind having classics on my shelf for quite a while, but I do mind having kind of new releases on my shelf for quite a while. This was adapted by Harold Pinter in the late 1980s, which I would love to watch once I've read the book. She is the last of our British classics. Right, now we're on to essays, lit biogs, poetry. One of the essay collections I'm really keen to get to, this will be a reread for me, is The White Album by Joan Didion. Joan Didion is one of my favourite women in the world. Slouching Towards Bethlehem is probably my favourite ever essay collection. I know almost every woman of my age thinks that about Joan Didion, but you know, there we go. This one is focused on, I guess, the backlash or the implosion of the culture of the 1960s. Written in California, which again is a theme. The 60s are a theme for this. There's essays in here on the Manson family, on the Black Panthers in prison. There's an essay in here on Doris Lessing, who you'll see pop up a little bit later as well. I can't wait to get to this. And then I also have, this is kind of literary biog called Sharp, The Women Who Made an Art of Having an Opinion by Michelle Dean. This is based on Dorothy Parker, who I'm obsessed with and who I'll mention again later. Hannah Ardent, Susan Sontag, Joan Didion, Mary McCarthy. It's just focused on then how they forged their careers. Not all feminists, but they've all had kind of an outsized impact on culture, on especially the culture kind of like women writers and readers. I'm really excited to get to this. I packed this away before I moved, and when I unpacked it, I was like, that is the perfect book for summer. Right, and then I have 2 literary biogs focused on authors. The first I don't own a copy of, but I will acquire one, and that is The Young Hemingway by Michael Reynolds. This is the first of a 5-volume Hemingway, of the Hemingway, the definitive kind of Hemingway biography that everybody always recommends. I think it goes The Young Hemingway, Hemingway the Parish Years, which is the one that I'm most interested in, Hemingway the Homecoming, him back in America, Hemingway in the 1930s, and then the last one is kind of like, I guess, Hemingway, the end of his life, legacy. I can't remember the name of the last one, but I want to make a start on this. Like I said, this is considered like the most kind of in-depth, the most detailed of all of the Hemingway biographies. I think I really enjoy this. I find the Hemingway like lore and his life so fascinating, troubling but fascinating. So I'll get to that. That's kind of hard to get hold of. So I will track down a physical copy. I do have it on Kobo, but I would love a physical copy because I know for a fact that I will want to go to the Paris years as soon as I've finished. The next up is George Eliot by Jenny Uglow. I hauled this in my spring book haul part 2. George Eliot, one of my favourite Victorian author and one of my favourite all-time authors. Jenny Uglow is a literary biographer and historian that I really trust and always really recommend. Recently I read a book by her called In These Times, which is the home front in Britain during the Napoleonic Wars. She's also done biographies on Gaskell and Edward Lear. I know once we get to autumn, my taste will move from California, 60s, summer, French Riviera to Dickens and Eliot and Gaskell. So in preparation for that, I would love to get to this. Right, and then we're into the poetry section. I'll have to do some serious editing on this to make it short. The first one we have is Ted Hughes and the Remains of Elmet. Ted Hughes, one of my favourite poets. One of my favourite ever poetry collections is Birthday Letters. This is from the 70s, and Elmet during kind of like the early Middle Ages into Anglo-Saxon England is what we now know as Yorkshire. So this, I think, is poems on kind of that area of like East Riding of Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, where he was from. I love that part of the country, so I'm really keen to get to this. Ted Hughes, very much like Ernest Hemingway, one of those men, as much as I might try, I just cannot dislike him. His work really speaks for itself. Is Stevie Smith, Selected Poetry, edited by Hermione Lee. I love these paper covers. I love this green, this like neon green. I may well be wrong in this, but I always think of Stevie Smith as like the British Dorothy Parker. And I'm like all here for Dorothy Parker. She was born, I think, in the early 1900s, is a contemporary of like George Orwell, but she was publishing right up until her death in the 1970s. Hermione Lee is another biographer who I really recommend. She's wrote biographies on Elizabeth Bowen, of Heat of the Day fame, and like Willa Cather, among like many others. So yeah, I can't wait to get to this. As it for books that I'm planning to get to, but quick mentions for works in progress. I will be heading to my next Agatha Christie. This week I'll be reading A Murder Is Announced, and my next one for summer will be The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. As it's summer and I associate like long summer days with reading Agatha Christie, I may well get to more than one. Also working on a kind of ongoing George Orwell project, which I recently did a review on Burmese Days, his first novel, and I kind of give an update of where I am with that in that video. I will link it down below. I'm currently reading, I'm about halfway through Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens. I'm really enjoying this. Nobody does a good story like Charles Dickens. I love Victorian London. I love how funny he is and how comforting he is. There's nobody better for plotting. I'm hoping to finish this by like the middle of June-ish, so I can get started on my summer long classics, but I'm enjoying this so much. Then I'm also reading The Golden Notebook by Doris Lessing. I have been reading this for a really long time. I'm in the middle of filming a kind of reading vlog for the weekend where I kind of get back to this, and over the last couple of days I'm finally in a place where this book is falling into place and is coming together, and I'm just so enthralled and excited by this book and what this book is doing. Right, that is it. Thank you for watching. The next video you will see will probably be a reading vlog, and then my May reading wrap up. May has been a great reading month. I've truly had such a good time, so I can't wait to film that one. I hope that you're all having a lovely day wherever you are, and I will see you all in the next video.